Hello and welcome to Politics. Today I'm Farooq Petafi. Once again we are going to talk about Afghanistan, which is a very important story. We have been focusing on this matter for quite some time, but there are three important developments that one has to actually focus on. Regarding Afghanistan, the situation keeps on degrading. We know that as far as the economy is concerned, it is not collapsing, it has collapsed already. Why we don't know about that, or we are not that much panicked, is because of the Afghan currency, Afghani. It doesn't have that kind of exposure to the outer world. So what we have seen so far is depreciation of around 20%, not more than that. But the fact is that because Afghanistan doesn't actually print its own money, and because foreign reserves of the country, foreign assets, are actually frozen in New York. That's why Afghanistan is in dire straits. Secondly, we know that their banking system is not operating at all either. So that becomes quite a situation when it comes to common citizens on the street. You must have seen that picture of a university professor who has been forced now to work as a day wage earner, a laborer. But that is not all. Zalmay Khalilzad, the man who oversaw the entire process across two administrations, decided, according to Pakistan's time, yesterday night, and we were told that it is a mutual agreement or understanding, and it had to be done. Of course, there are people who are suggesting that the man was actually held responsible for cutting out the Afghan government, the former Afghan government, out of the process, which might have led to the situation. But to be honest, Zalmay Khalilzad was doing whatever he was told by two administrations, especially the previous administration, when the agreement took place. And he is going to be replaced by his assistant, Thomas West, a person who has domain knowledge of Afghanistan, who has domain knowledge of these policies as well. Earlier, when the Taliban and the US government actually met in Doha again, usually it was Zalmay Khalilzad's office who would actually represent or chair America's side. This time it didn't happen. Deputy Director Cohen of the CIA actually led the talks. So what exactly does it mean? On the other side, tomorrow in Moscow, we are going to see a very important meeting of various stakeholders or regional partners, and Afghan Taliban is going to be represented there as well. Despite that, none of the governments so far neighboring Afghanistan have recognized a de facto government of Taliban. Whether it is going to change, we are going to talk about that as well. But there are concerns regarding these matters because government of Pakistan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, the Army Chief of Pakistan have repeatedly said that Afghan Taliban, if they seek recognition, will have to be more lenient towards women's rights. Especially, I have seen at least a couple of speeches from the Army Chief as well. We are going to talk about all these matters and more to understand how Afghanistan's situation is going to further move ahead. The world community that has actually committed so much to Afghanistan, so far we have seen commitments, but what are the channels which are going to be used? You don't recognize the Kabul government. How else will you operate on ground? These are important questions. In order to help us understand these issues in the studio, I am joined by Hassam Saab, who is Special Assistant to Prime Minister, and not only that, some regular commentator on these matters. He has his own column in his own right. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Anwarul Haq Kakar Saab, Senator of Balochistan Awami Party, a party that is these days in news for not the right reasons, but it is there. But he is a government's ally. An old Afghan hand also keeps on focusing on these matters, and whenever I need clarity, I talk to him. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. We will be joined on telephone by a third guest from Washington. The moment he joins us, I'm going to introduce Right. Anwar Iqbal Saab, senior journalist, joins us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Anwar Saab, for being part of the program. Well, let me start with the studio. Hassam Saab. We keep on, hearing and watching Prime Minister talk about these matters. And he keeps on saying that the world will have to engage with the Afghan Taliban in order to mitigate the disaster Afghanistan is facing. But do we have a clear strategy how to actually approach this matter?
Well, I suppose the strategy has been very clear from day one, so far as Pakistan is concerned. I don't think there has been any ambiguity about it. In fact, for the rest of the world also, I think there does not appear to be a choice at this stage. I mean, what is the option? To engage with Taliban or to abandon them? So what do you get out of engaging with them, basically? Well, they have committed to doing so many things, in terms of inclusivity, in terms of human rights, in terms of women's rights, and in terms of women representation in the cabinet. Right. These are commitments made by the Taliban. Unfortunately, till today, as we discuss things in the studio, most of these promises have not been fulfilled. So there are two ways to go forward. Number one, abandon them, boycott them, threaten them, cause a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, like you have elaborately explained in your introductory remarks, or to engage with them and to egg them on, to encourage them, to incentivize them to move further, basically. So Pakistan's position and most of the regional countries' position is that we need to engage with them, we need to incentivize them and encourage them to do what they promised to do.
How? What mechanism?
Mechanism is that there will be pressure. There will be pressure of not extending formal recognition to them. And the formal recognition technically will come only when most of the promises made by them have been fulfilled.
Right.
I see that they are gradually moving in that direction. See, nothing can happen in case you hang the Damocles sword over their head. That's not the way it is going to happen. If you push them, they're going to, they're not just going to cave in. So the only way to go forward and to help them fulfill the promises that they have made is by engaging with them and egging them on, basically, over a period of time. The Western world's stance at this moment in time is self-defeating, because if they are genuinely interested in peace in Afghanistan, which Pakistan and the regional countries are, because it matters a lot for us, then I think we need to work with the Taliban government. Good or bad is a different thing altogether. We need to work with them for the cause of peace.
The question was primarily not about the regional approach. The question was Pakistan's own approach. You're talking about incentivizing, right? You have to have levers. What levers does Pakistan have to actually encourage them to move in the right direction? We are going to talk about that. With your permission, let me bring in Senator Kakar Saab. Senator Kakar, Prime Minister actually yesterday also spoke about the need to unfreeze Afghanistan's assets so that Afghan government or whatever there is actually moves forward. Now the question is, will that happen? If that doesn't happen, how does Pakistan help Afghanistan in coming days?
Pakistan to Afghanistan is not just a neighbor, but it is emerging as a bridge between the rest of the world and Afghanistan, be it in the region or be it with the Western Hemisphere. Pakistan has been advocating the case of Afghan people. It's not just Afghan Taliban. People are mistakenly taking the case of Afghanistan as somebody is advocating for Taliban or the current political dispensation. When Prime Minister or the government of Pakistan actually advocates, they are referring to the humanitarian crisis which could be faced by 400 million people.
Right. That might be at low intensity, might be faced
40
today.
million people.
Yeah.
But
even grassroots level, people are suffering.
Exactly, and God forbid if the situation continues, this would exacerbate the security situation, it would worsen further, and who's going to benefit from that? It is the more radicalized version of terrorist outfits like ISISK, TTP, and so on and so forth, which is not just problem for the Afghan territory or Afghan populace, it would be a huge threat to Pakistan, to the region, to Central Asia, to China,
everywhere,
and probably Europe. And I feel amongst the Western Hemisphere, the EU appreciates and understands the situation far clearly. than their counterpart in the US. And this is one of the reasons that they have pledged 1.5 billion, either euro or dollars, for humanitarian aid. And they want to dispense that so that the general populace doesn't go for those extreme measures. And immediately what is required or what is needed, that a de facto government should be accepted, if not recognized.
But am I right in understanding that when it comes to Pakistan's role, Pakistan essentially is going to be an advisor to the Committee of Nations and Afghanistan, but Pakistan doesn't have on its own any incentives to offer to Afghan government?
Well, you can't, we can't say that we do have some incentives, but at the same time, when we are bridging between Afghanistan and the rest of the world, this is the biggest incentive. I think so. We and the Qataris, we are contesting in that kind of influence.
Why not complementing? Why contesting?
Well, it is always that you try to have influence for your own nation state. So yes, even if you are complementing each other, at the same time you are contesting also.
With your permission, let me go to Anwar Iqbal Sahab. Anwar Iqbal Sahab, you are in DC. I'm sure that you are listening to the policy debate that is going on. We saw the congressional hearings as well. At this moment, it seems that the Afghan Taliban's case is nowhere in DC. Nobody is actually pondering over how to actually help them. On the other side, it seems that Pakistan's advice is not getting through. Am I right, or there is something different going on? Anwar Sahab, are you with us? Okay, there seems to be some connectivity issue. Till that time, let me come back to the studio. Rav Sahab, levers. What levers does Pakistan have? How to incentivize Afghan de facto government at this moment?
So if you go back a few years, Pakistan has demonstrated that it has influence on the Taliban. I don't think we need to sort of keep asserting that again and again. We brought about a rapprochement between the Americans and the Taliban. We also helped them initiate the Doha dialogue, and we still are, I think, a country which is most in touch with the Taliban government, and as I said, incentivizing them is a huge, like my friend has said, it's a huge means of influencing the Taliban to move ahead, because no other country, either in the region or in the world, has engaged as much as Pakistan has. So I feel that it doesn't, influence does not mean that you have a weapon to fire at people. I think it basically means that you have certain levers under your control, which you can exercise. And at this moment in time, Taliban's isolation is the biggest impediment or the biggest fear that they have. And if we can play a role, like again my friend has explained, if we can play a role to sort of remove that isolation for the Taliban government, and have it, if not formally recognized, at least like again you pointed out so many things in your introductory remarks. At this stage, the biggest problem for the government in Kabul is to facilitate this delivery of monies to them.
And basic services.
So that that those assets which have been frozen, they should be unfrozen. The banking channels have to be operationalized, and other mechanisms put in place, so that the state can begin to function as a proper entity, which it is not at this moment in time, and that is causing immense issues, for the people of Afghanistan. Our commitment primarily is to the people of the country. We are not committed as much to the Taliban, one kind of government or the other kind of government. Basically, our commitment, permanent commitment, is to the people of Afghanistan. So we have to continue remaining engaged with the Taliban and help that the chasm, that the gulf, between Afghanistan government on the one hand and the rest of the world, particularly the Western world,
we are going to be the bridge, as he has also pointed out. But regarding money, because Afghan government at this moment needs money, and Pakistan has its own challenges. I'm going to come back to that in a bit. Let me bring in Anwar Iqbal Sahab. Sir, what is Washington thinking at this moment about Afghanistan, and how Zalmay Khalilzad's stepping down is going to affect the Afghanistan policy in coming days?
I think the new person that they appointed today, that apartment shows that they want a continuation of the whole policy, because the new person is Mr. West, who was already the deputy, I think his name is Thomas Wade, who was also already the deputy rep for Afghanistan, and he has been doing this job for quite some time. So he also worked in the National Security Council. He also worked with Vice President Joe Biden when he was the Vice President. So I think they want to continue the policies of, their policies and that of the Trump administration and those before them.
Right. In coming days, are we going to see any kind of formal, contacts and any movement towards engagement, further engagement or recognition of the Afghan
They are
government?
very clear on that. They are very clear on that. They said that they will stay in touch. They are in touch with the Taliban officials, and they will stay in touch. And they said whenever it serves U.S. national interest, they will contact the Taliban, but they're not going to recognize the Taliban government yet. Yeah. And first, they say the Taliban have to meet certain conditions that are already known to the Taliban, which includes an inclusive government, which includes giving certain rights to women, minorities, etc. And unless that is done, they are not going to recognize it.
Right. Regarding what you're saying, sir, I understand. We vaguely know what the expectations of the of the U.S. government is, but do we have any formal benchmark to actually assess and know what might be the policy levels that the U.S. has and how to actually move forward? Point one: if you do this thing and to this level, we are going to release this thing. And if you do take further steps, then we are going to this, that, or the other thing.
I think they are discussing these things directly with the Taliban, and they definitely have known what they expect of the Taliban, and obviously the Taliban also have informed Americans what they can or cannot do, but both sides are not yet talking about those things openly. You need to understand that any U.S. administration has to be very, very, very careful with Afghanistan now. It was a very unpopular war from day one. I mean, when the American forces moved in, yes, they took over, they brought down the Taliban government, that's fine. After that, immediately after that, the war, when I think one of your panelists, Muhammad Ali, was also here, and that was like in 2003 or something. It was already a very unpopular war. And right now, the other day I went to a billiard club, and I just for the heck of it, being journalists, I started talking to ordinary Americans. These are not very educated people. And I said, so do you think America should help Afghanistan? They said, hell no. They wanted us out. We are out. We don't want to have anything to them. So giving assistance to them, they said, no, not a penny. This is the general sentiment here. So the government obviously does not share this sentiment, and the government is providing humanitarian assistance and they stay involved. But as far as ordinary Americans are concerned, they don't want to have anything to do with Afghan. Remember during the protest against the Afghan war, there was this woman whose son was killed in Afghanistan, and she used to collect like a dozen or so other women whose sons or brothers had been killed or husbands had been killed in Afghanistan, and she would bring them on stage and ask them to do one simple thing: pronounce Afghanistan. And none of them could pronounce Afghanistan properly. And then she would come on the stage and say, why should our kids die for a country whose name we cannot even pronounce properly? Why should we care about Afghans and Afghanistan, whether that country exists or tomorrow it disappears from the face of the earth? We have no interest. Please pull our sons and children out of this place.
Right, so that's an important point. Anwar Iqbal Sahab, I'm told that you are traveling at this moment, and that might actually be contributing to the communication problem, connectivity problem. But thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Let me come back to the studio. Anwarul Haqqaqat Sahab, we are talking about ways to incentivize Afghan government, right? And Pakistan can, of course, advise the entire world on how to actually go about these matters. Pakistan has done it in the past 3 years as well. Question right now is, Afghanistan needs money. In Pakistan, actually, there are many punters or pundits who say that the reason why rupee is weakening is because Pakistan is bleeding US dollar to Afghanistan. So at this moment, it is one thing we cannot offer to Afghanistan. How else can we help Afghan government, whatever it is?
Look, Patafi, it's not just advising. I think so the more appropriate word would be that
Advocacy?
we are doing or leading a conversation, a political discourse on Afghan situation with the rest of the world, which has been engaged in this region and in Afghanistan for the last 2 decades. It's US, it's Europe, it's Australia, it's almost the rest of the world. And a failed experience of a nation building and military presence is haunting the rest of the world. They have spent trillions of dollars leaving behind a failed state and 40 million people who probably would be starving to death this winter. It's a very grave and serious situation. So you intervened in a country, spent $2 trillion, stayed there for 20 years, and the situation is that people are starving to death. So it needs a conversation. This situation needs a discourse. And Pakistan would be leading that discourse.
That done. What else?
So when you are leading this discourse, all the connected partners who are engaged in this conversation, they have to share some responsibility of why this situation is where we are today. So it is not the making of Pakistan, it is the making of the entire global community. So what do? Leave these 40 million people, let them starve to death because the territory has been now controlled by the Afghan Taliban. So now we cannot give you something to eat, medicine to be treated, because you have been now controlled by Afghan Taliban. This is bizarre. So this real approach needs to be reversed. What I was referring to, that Europe has realized that. If, let's say, these Afghan, they start moving from this region towards the west, their romantic destination would be Europe. Europe may end up with 1 million, 2 million refugees, old, new, no one knows. All they need to be identified as Afghans, and if they land at the continent, they have to be given a refugee status. Is Fortress Europe prepared for that? I don't think so.
It is not.
A better approach for them would be that let's focus on the territory where the people are, provide some kind of an humanitarian umbrella where some basic edible items, medicine, all the humanitarian aid starts flowing in. They should have some working relationship with the current political dispensation which the Taliban are. Let's postpone the recognition question for a while and let the situation settle for a year, 2 or whatever. And then those big questions of legitimacy and recognition, they would be followed.
And the problem so far, and I get when you were talking about Fortress Europe, that unfortunately this meltdown has happened when the entire world has become anti-immigrant and refugee, and that becomes a huge crisis. But let us come back to what is happening in Afghanistan and what is happening in the region. One, what are Pakistan's expectations from Moscow conference? That is very important. And then we saw another conference that might take place in November, and we have heard from the media that an invitation has been dispatched to Yusuf Saab in India. Are we going to go there? Is Pakistan going to participate in those talks as well or not? These 2 questions.
2 or 3 things, actually I would like to sort of, comment on them together. While my friend has raised this question of postponing formal recognition of Afghanistan for a year or 2 years, I beg to kind of look at it differently. I don't think it's something that you can postpone for that long. So the fact you said, what is Pakistan's principal interest? Pakistan's principal interest is to forge homogeneity among the regional countries, particularly Afghanistan's neighbors, to move in that direction jointly. so that it should come not from one country or another country, and then the others to follow, but the regional countries, including Afghanistan's neighbors in particular, they should move ahead with extending formal recognition. And I think that is imperative to facilitate the transmittal of funds to Afghanistan also, to operationalize the banking system, and other channels of communication and all that, without extending a formal recognition. Like, European Union has sanctioned 1.2 billion euros to be given to Afghanistan. Not a penny has been extended. I've been in touch with the United Nations people in Islamabad. They have the money which they want to send for the welfare of the Afghan people, but they cannot. So one of the UN bodies actually bought a few $1 million from the market. And they took those dollars physically to Afghanistan. So this is not something that can continue for long. So obviously, extending recognition, formal recognition, is a major component of facilitating all these things.
And when you talk about recognition, one question comes to mind. What Washington does, what Beijing does, what Moscow does, right? Or for that matter, Tehran, is not within our control. You are actually Prime Minister's special assistant. Tell us, why haven't we recognized Afghan Taliban so far?
But I think it is not tenable at this moment in time, because we're trying to forge a regional consensus. This is the point that I'm trying to make.
Is it not what he is also saying?
No. That is not what he's saying. He's saying that we can postpone the recognition by a year or 1 year. Technically,
we should or we can.
What
I'm referring to is probably the rest of the world community would do that.
That is different. That's different. If we are able to achieve our coveted goal, which is regional consensus to move ahead with Afghanistan, this is what we are trying to do. This is uppermost, and in fact, there are multiple strands of dialogue going on at this moment in time. You've talked about the other one. I'll come to that later. Right now, Ambassador Sadiq is there in Afghanistan, and there was a sub meeting, between the special envoys of Pakistan, China, and Russia before commencement of the Moscow meeting tomorrow. And I think these are the three countries basically, and you also talked about China and Russia. These are the countries basically which are spearheading the movement, for building consensus in the regional countries. And I think in due course of time, which is not going to be 1 or 2 years, I think much earlier than that, I think there will be a consensus forged to move forward, with Afghanistan, which is important. So far as the meeting in India is concerned, yes, an invitation has been extended to NSA Waheed Yusuf. I don't know what will whether he will go there or not, but I feel that the decision will be in the negative rather than in the positive. This is my personal conjecture. This is my personal projection.
Can you explain why?
Why? Because I think India has virtually nothing to do with Afghanistan as it exists today. They are not a party to the forward momentum in Afghanistan. They have not contributed to that, and they unfortunately have been using the Afghan soil, for the purpose of destabilizing Pakistan. And this is the reason I think we would not like to encourage their induction back into the fold. This is my personal projection. I'm not aware of what the official position is going to be. That could be different, from what from my projection.
Moscow meeting and then India meeting. Your comments on both?
Well, I would second on India what Mr. Rauf has said. There's no doubt all India had a role in Afghanistan was to destabilize Pakistan. This was the only target or the benchmark they had in mind, that why they want to be engaged in Afghanistan. They were for no constructive engagement in Afghanistan. If you
so what you are saying is sending your NSA to India will actually provide some measure of legitimacy to the process?
Or acceptability, if not short of legitimacy, is acceptability. Again, my own personal opinion and assessment, we should deny both. Neither legitimacy nor acceptability.
Can't Pakistan even send someone unofficially at a junior level? Because the idea is leave no room, empty, that somebody can sit there and plot against you.
That probably would be better for the Foreign Office to comment, and they would go through, they would mull over.
I wanted to know your view on
my personal view is that if we disengage with India as far as Afghanistan is concerned, we send a signal that we do not recognize what sort of role India is aspiring to have in future, because it is not its immediate neighbor, it does not have any constructive engagement for last 2 decades. It has been using terrorism as a tool against Pakistan and Pakistani people. So And there is no plan as far as the constructive engagement of the current Afghan dispensation is concerned. What is there in their mind as far as the political dispensation is concerned, or common Afghans are concerned.
Right. And Moscow? What are the expectations?
Yes, Moscow definitely is an important player in the region. Moscow has a role. Moscow has been playing a role. Well, meeting, I think so. It's a high time that the question of legitimacy and recognition should be deliberated in Moscow.
Right. Okay.
That would be the.
It will be deliberated, but do you think that it will be forthcoming?
We have to wait and see. We have to see what comes out of it. But my own expectation would be that this is high time that we should exploit that forum for formalizing this goal to be pursued. That it, as Mr. Rauf was said, that it is very imperative, the recognition part. So the rest of the humanitarian activities could correlate and followed by the recognition.
Right. Rauf, are you privy to the talks between the government and Afghan de facto government regarding human rights and all the concerns of the Western, forces, because the matter of girls' rights and their education. I have 2 daughters, and Afghan girls are not going to school when it comes to higher school, right? Secondary school. And then there is the matter of being inclusive or not. And we have seen at the start, we heard a lot about inclusivity. In the end, we see all positions being taken by Afghan Taliban. What is the conversation like?
You have put 2 or 3 sub-questions into one question, basically. First of all, let the situation, the exact situation in Afghanistan at this moment in time is that all the primary schools are open for both boys and girls.
Yeah.
Virtually all the universities are open for both boys and girls. It is just the secondary schools. In about 4 or 5 provinces, even the secondary schools have been opened. So this is the exact, so it is not that there is no progress. There is progress and tangible progress. So what I expect to happen is that over a period of time, which is not going to be a lot, I think all the secondary schools will also open. So that is as far as girls' education is concerned. Number 2
can you do you have any timeline in mind?
I don't. It's not going to be years. It's going to be weeks and months, or possibly even earlier than that. Weeks possibly, and hopefully, even earlier than that. And there is constant persuasion from Pakistan, not pressure. Persuasion for Pakistan. The Prime Minister has said it multiple times that we want an inclusive government in Afghanistan. He said, we want them to respect human rights. He's also said all these things, multiple times. So it's there. The Western approach is not one of engagement. The Western approach is not one of reconciliation. The Western approach is of taking revenge for their defeat in Afghanistan. And Pakistan appears to be the principal target of that onslaught. So they are not looking, particularly America. I agree with my friend that EU has a qualitatively different approach, towards Afghanistan. And I think they've sanctioned the money and they want to transmit that money to Afghanistan, and they are holding it back simply because it is the Americans who are not helping out with facilitating transmittal of humanitarian assistance and monies, to Afghanistan. So at some point in time, I see 2 or 3 things happening. Number 1, I think the EU countries and the rest of Europe, will have to possibly break themselves away from the American shadow. And they will have to act independently.
That has been advocated by President Macron as well recently.
Yeah, they will have to act independent of the American influence.
But you are talking about an EU which is changing. In Germany, within a couple of months, weeks perhaps, there's going to be a new government, right? Quite different from the previous one. In France, the far right is rising so quickly that within months it is going to perhaps totally dominate their.
But obviously we're looking at it as how things stand today. Obviously these changes. I mean, everything is fluid. Everything is fluid. But the fact is that at this moment in time, the EU approach to Afghanistan is far different as compared to the American approach to Afghanistan. At this moment in time, once again, let me reiterate, the principal problem to facilitating forward momentum in Afghanistan is the United States of America, not anybody else in the world.
Right.
So that is a major crisis.
That's an important point to remember.
That's a major crisis.
Kakar Sahab, let me borrow a term that Steve Jobs actually used to use, and that is impute, to present in a better manner, right? At this moment, Afghan Taliban have done many things One of them is to replace the women ministry with the Vice and Virtue Department, right? That ministry, and having one conservative woman in the ministry actually in the cabinet, could have changed the impression of Afghan government totally. But somehow nobody has been able to convince Taliban that this is an option and this actually works for them. Why is it that in our conversation this is not a solution that we have advocated or convinced them to do?
Look, we should not forget that Afghan Taliban has not taken over the government after a very liberal electoral process.
Yeah.
They have taken over this government while fighting an insurgency with international military forces for 20 years.
Right.
And
But they need money, don't they?
I mean, you are handling a very radicalized and fundamentalist group who have certain core beliefs. So let's accept that. So if a group of human beings have certain fundamentalist core belief system, what is the requirement or the approach of the rest of the mankind should be to just eliminate them for what they believe in, or have sort of a mid pathway of engaging with them. You may disagree with them, you may agree with them. They have many issues with which either Pakistan or the rest of the world do not agree.
Yeah.
But does that mean that we go for the complete annihilation of 40 million people? Of course not.
No, but nobody is doing that. Nobody is advocating that. But out of those 40 million, 20 million are
One
women,
little
right?
point that I would like to interject
No,
with. Just,
I'll just no one is denying the women any sort of the basic cultural rights which either Iran has or Pakistan. The girls are attending the school. It's a complete false impression that girls are not attending the school.
Right.
Yes, there is a resource constraint, whether they are able to open up all the schools. There's no policy where they're denying girls education. Girls are attending the schools.
Yeah,
Women are attending
the question was
university.
about how you market yourself, right? And
Yes,
that
just
might
one
actually ease
ministry,
burden
yes.
on Pakistan
One
as
little
well.
point that I want to make is that the West, more specifically the Americans, are very comfortable dealing with so many other countries in the world, particularly the Middle East, who have no female representation at all. They're signing agreements worth billions with them. They're comfortable. They don't come up even, with sort of putting it across, as a plea that do this. Why is it that they're so discriminatory towards one other country? I mean, not that I agree with it. No, I think women should be represented.
Yes.
Let's open and clear about it.
Yeah.
Women should be effectively represented in the cabinet, and women should be able to, they have a right to education, they have a right to work, they have all the rights that men have.
Yeah.
That is unquestionable. But the fact is, it is the Western hypocrisy, which is the American hypocrisy, which is coming out loud and clear here. While there's so many countries they are engaged with working, they're patronizing. Without any female representation in the government. Why is it that this mental block is only for the Taliban
They cannot
government in
be
Afghanistan?
judged or treated on this one single issue that they do not have this particular ministry.
The concern, and I totally get what the double standards that we are talking about. The reason perhaps is that money, in this case is other way around. You need to provide money to this government, not actually take their money like it is done by the Middle East, right? So that actually has its own dynamic. Let us be realistic about it. But the fact is that if this happens, if women, and they're pulverized, a lot of families are, there is no head of the family, no male head of the family, and women used to work. If they are going to be allowed to starve, it is going to become a problem, right? So it helps Pakistan when Pakistan presents this case. I'm told that we have to conclude the program here. Anwarul Kakar sir, thank you very much sir, for being part of the program. Rauf Hassan sir,
Thank you.
having you in the show. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. The question of Afghanistan still hangs in balance. Pakistan is a well-wisher of Afghanistan. It keeps on doing whatever it can to help Afghanistan. But remember, when it comes to broken places, unfortunately, I don't take any pleasure in saying that Afghanistan is still a broken place. they have their dynamics that they can suck in other countries into the vortex. And that has happened with the Soviet Union, it has happened with America for 20 years, and it can happen to any regional player. At this moment, what is going to happen in Moscow matters, and all the diplomats who are going out of the way to try to fix or find a solution to Afghanistan question, they must be encouraged and complimented, because otherwise situation is going to go really dire. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.